Ghislaine Maxwell, daughter of British media tycoon Robert Maxwell, went from Oxford University to Manhattan's social elite as Jeffrey Epstein's closest associate. In December 2021, a jury convicted her on 5 federal charges, including sex trafficking of minors, and she's now serving 20 years in a minimum security federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas. She recently appeared before Congress, invoking her Fifth Amendment rights, while her attorney suggested she would testify fully if granted clemency by President Trump. Subscribe for more deep dives into high-profile cases that shaped our world. Ghislaine Maxwell was born on Christmas Day, 1961, in Maisons-Laffitte, France, the youngest of 9 children. Her father was Robert Maxwell, born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hock in Czechoslovakia, to a poor Hasidic Jewish family. Most of his relatives were killed in the Holocaust. He escaped to France as a teenager, then joined the British Army during World War II, earning military decorations for his service in the Normandy invasion. By the time he changed his name to Robert Maxwell, he had transformed himself into a British media tycoon with a posh accent and connections to power. Her mother, Elizabeth, was French, a researcher of the Holocaust, and according to her own 1994 memoir, a woman who remained devoted to her husband despite his demanding personality. Ghislaine was born just 2 days before her 15-year-old brother Michael was severely injured in a car accident. He remained in a coma until his death in 1967. Elizabeth Maxwell later wrote that the family virtually ignored Ghislaine during her first few years because of Michael's condition, and she observed signs of anorexia in her daughter while she was still a toddler. The family lived at Headington Hill Hall in Oxford, a 53-room mansion that Robert Maxwell leased for his company, Pergamon Press, and used as a residence. The estate hosted parties attended by politicians, celebrities, and occasionally royalty. Robert Maxwell ran his household the way he ran his businesses, with an autocratic style that those who knew him described as bullying and tyrannical. His former chief of staff, Peter J., who had served as UK ambassador to the United States, called him, like a great prehistoric animal, uncivilized and gross and dangerous and clumsy and very unhouse-trained. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, Ghislaine became what many described as her father's favorite child. Robert Maxwell reportedly told Roy Greenslade, his Daily Mirror editor, that Ghislaine was the child most like me. She attended private schools in Oxford and Somerset, then entered Balliol College at the University of Oxford, where she earned a degree in modern history and languages in 1985. During the 1980s, she became a prominent figure in London's social scene, founding a women's club named after the Kit Kat Club. In the mid-1980s, Robert Maxwell made her a director of Oxford United Football Club, which he had saved from bankruptcy. She later ran Maxwell Corporate Gifts, a company her father helped her create, and worked as a business manager for The European, her father's weekly English-language newspaper. In 1986, Robert Maxwell invited Ghislaine to the Netherlands for the christening of his new yacht, a 187-foot vessel he named the Lady Ghislaine in her honor. The yacht was equipped with a jacuzzi, sauna, gym, and disco. She spent considerable time aboard it in the late 1980s, traveling with her father to various destinations. Some observers viewed this as a snub to Elizabeth, as Ghislaine increasingly appeared in public with Robert far more frequently than her mother did, almost functioning as a surrogate partner in his public life. In May 1991, Robert Maxwell purchased the New York Daily News and sent Ghislaine to New York to represent his interests. This gave her entry into Manhattan's social scene. That same month, father and daughter flew on the Concorde to New York, where he departed for Moscow and left her to represent him at an event honoring Holocaust survivor Simon Wiesenthal. According to the Sunday Times, in 1990 Maxwell had also sent Ghislaine to New York to deliver an envelope that, unbeknownst to her, was part of what the newspaper described as a plot initiated by her father to steal $200 million from Berlitz shareholders. On November 4, 1991, Robert Maxwell had an argumentative phone call with his son Kevin about a scheduled meeting with the Bank of England regarding Maxwell's default on £50 million in loans. Instead of attending that meeting, Robert Maxwell sailed on the Lady Ghislaine to the Canary Islands. On the morning of November 5, 1991, the crew discovered he was missing. His naked body was recovered from the Atlantic Ocean near the Canary Islands, and taken to Las Palmas. Aside from a graze on his left shoulder, there were no noticeable wounds. An inquest in December 1991 ruled the cause of death as a heart attack combined with accidental drowning, though 3 pathologists were unable to agree on the exact cause. Some speculated he had been urinating into the ocean when he fell overboard, as he often did. Ghislaine flew to Tenerife, where the yacht was berthed, to handle his business paperwork. She attended her father's funeral in Jerusalem, where he was buried on the Mount of Olives. Israeli intelligence figures attended, and Israeli President Chaim Herzog and Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir delivered eulogies. British Prime Minister John Major called it an extraordinary life, lived to the full, and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev said Maxwell's death left a void. Within days of Robert Maxwell's death, investigators discovered he had stolen over £400 million from his company's pension funds, affecting 32,000 employees. The total theft was later estimated at over $1.2 billion from his companies and pension schemes. The Maxwell family's reputation collapsed overnight. 2 of Ghislaine's brothers, Ian and Kevin, faced lengthy criminal proceedings related to the pension fund fraud, but were acquitted in January 1996 after a 130-day trial. Kevin Maxwell was declared bankrupt by a London court for a record £406 million. The family fortune was gone. Accounts differ on exactly when and how Ghislaine Maxwell met Jeffrey Epstein. According to Stephen Hoffenberg, one of Epstein's former business partners, Robert Maxwell introduced his daughter to Epstein in the late 1980s. However, the Times reported that Maxwell met Epstein in the early 1990s at a New York party, following a difficult breakup with Count Gianfranco Sicagna of the Siga Hotels family. In recent interviews with the Department of Justice, Maxwell herself stated she met Epstein in 1991 at his offices on Madison Avenue, describing it as a blind first date. She said they befriended each other in 1991 and developed a sexual relationship in 1992. By February 1993, Maxwell and Epstein were publicly associated with each other. What is clear from the record is that the timing was significant. Ghislaine had just lost her father, her family's reputation was destroyed, and the lifestyle she had known vanished. Epstein, a financier who managed money for wealthy clients, offered her a pathway back into the world of wealth and social prominence she had grown accustomed to. From the beginning, each benefited from the relationship in different ways. Epstein gained access to Maxwell's extensive social network, which eventually included connections to Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and other prominent figures. Maxwell, whose financial resources had declined dramatically after her father's death, was able to resume a wealthy lifestyle. She managed Epstein's properties in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and New Mexico, organized social events, and became his most visible companion throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s. Photographs from this period show them together at high-profile events and locations, including an undated photograph at Queen Elizabeth's Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The nature of their relationship evolved over time. Prosecutors at her trial stated that from 1994 to 1997 they were engaged in an intimate relationship, though Maxwell herself told the Department of Justice that they rarely had sex during their romantic period and that the relationship ended around the time of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. What came next would define the rest of her life and lead to her eventual conviction 2 decades later. The FBI arrested Maxwell on July 2, 2020, at a remote 156-acre estate in Bradford, New Hampshire, that she'd purchased through a shell company using cash. She'd been out of public view for nearly a year following Epstein's arrest in July 2019 and his death in a Manhattan jail cell in August 2019, which was ruled a suicide. Federal prosecutors charged her with conspiracy to entice minors to travel to engage in illegal sex acts, enticement of a minor, conspiracy to transport minors with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and sex trafficking of a minor. At her arraignment on July 14, 2020, Maxwell pleaded not guilty. Federal prosecutors stated that Maxwell was married, though she did not disclose the identity of her spouse or their finances. It later emerged that she had married Scott Borgerson, a tech entrepreneur, in 2016. The marriage ended in 2021 via a prison phone call. Judge Allison Nathan initially set a trial date for July 2021, but delayed it to November 29, 2021. After Maxwell's defense lawyers successfully argued that new charges added in March 2021 didn't give them enough time to prepare. Maxwell was held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn while awaiting trial. Her lawyers repeatedly requested bail, offering $5 million bond with monitored home confinement. But the court denied each request, ruling that she posed a flight risk. If you're finding this documentary informative, subscribe for more deep dives into cases that shaped our world. The trial began on November 29, 2021, in Manhattan Federal Court. 12 jurors had been selected, plus 6 alternates. Prosecutor Laura Pomerantz delivered the government's opening statement, describing how Maxwell and Epstein created what she called a pyramid scheme of abuse, luring underage girls into sexual relationships with Epstein and paying them bonuses to bring other girls into the operation. Maxwell's defense attorney, Bobby Sternheim, argued that her client was being made a scapegoat for Epstein's crimes because he was unalive to face justice. She told the jury that Maxwell was a woman who had been manipulated by Epstein and that prosecutors needed someone to blame. The prosecution focused on 4 women out of more than 100 potential victims. Each testified about their experiences as teenagers in the 1990s and early 2000s. The first accuser testified under the pseudonym Jane. She told the court she was 14 years old in 1994 when she met Maxwell and Epstein at Interlochen Arts Camp in Michigan, where she was a student. Jane testified that Maxwell and Epstein began grooming her, inviting her to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. She described how Maxwell sometimes participated directly in sexual abuse, joining in what she called sexualized massages. Jane said the abuse continued until 1999, when she moved from New York to Los Angeles. Under cross-examination, Maxwell's defense team pointed to what they claimed were inconsistencies between Jane's trial testimony and her earlier FBI interviews. Jane responded that she couldn't recall every detail of her conversations with investigators, but believed some of the notes they took were inaccurate. The second accuser testified under the pseudonym Kate. She told the court she was a 17-year-old British woman when she met Maxwell through an older boyfriend in Paris in 1994. Kate said she was lonely at the time and lived near Maxwell in Belgravia, London. Maxwell invited her for tea, and Kate saw her as a new friend. On a subsequent visit, Epstein was present. Kate testified that Maxwell encouraged her to massage Epstein's feet and shoulders to show him how strong she was. She said Maxwell later asked her to visit Epstein's Palm Beach home and directed her to put on a schoolgirl outfit before giving Epstein a massage. Kate testified that Maxwell asked her if she knew any other cute, young and pretty people who could perform oral sex on Epstein, saying it was a lot for her to do, and that Epstein needed to have sex about 3 times a day. Because Kate was over the age of consent at the time, 17 in the UK where the age of consent is 16 and 18 in the US, Judge Nathan ruled that her testimony could not form the basis for conviction on any counts. However, the jury was allowed to consider her testimony as evidence of a pattern of grooming and abuse. The third accuser testified using only her first name, Carolyn. She told the court she was 14 years old when she began visiting Epstein's Palm Beach home in the early 2000s, brought there by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, another Epstein accuser. Carolyn said she went to the house 2 or 3 times per week. She testified that on one visit, while she was setting up a massage room, Maxwell came in and touched her breasts, hips, and buttocks. Maxwell told her she had a great body for Epstein and his friends, according to Carolyn's testimony. Carolyn said she visited Epstein's home over 100 times. Each time, $300 in cash was left for her on the bathroom sink. Something sexual happened every single time, she testified. She said she brought 3 different friends around her age with her over the years. On those occasions, she received $600 in cash as an incentive for bringing them, and her friends received $300. Carolyn testified that Maxwell would call to schedule these massage appointments. She said that later, a woman named Sarah Kellen took over scheduling duties, but Maxwell was still present in the house during some of Carolyn's visits. Under cross-examination, Maxwell's defense attorneys noted that in a 2007 FBI interview, Carolyn did not mention Maxwell once. Carolyn responded that the interview was about Epstein and she was not asked about Maxwell at that time. The fourth and final accuser was Annie Farmer, the only witness to testify under her full name. Farmer, 42 at the time of trial, had spoken publicly about Epstein and Maxwell for years. She testified for 3 hours. Farmer told the court she first met Epstein in late 1995 or early 1996, when she was 16 years old, during a trip to visit her older sister Maria in New York. Maria was working for Epstein at the time. Epstein paid for Annie's commercial flight and took both sisters to see The Phantom of the Opera and then a movie. During the movie, Farmer testified, Epstein sat between the two sisters. She said he held her hand and caressed her foot and leg. I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't something that I was at all expecting, she said. Farmer read portions from her journal entries written in January 1996, in which she described feeling weird about Epstein's behavior, but telling herself it was probably normal and fine. She wrote that she didn't tell her sister about the incident because her sister worshipped Epstein and she feared it would upset her or cost her sister her job. In the spring of 1996, Farmer testified, she went to Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico for what she believed would be a retreat with other students. She met Maxwell for the first time there. She was the only teenager present. Farmer testified that Maxwell offered to give her a massage. She said Maxwell directed her to undress and get under a sheet on a massage table. Maxwell massaged her back, then directed her to turn over and pulled the sheet down. Farmer testified that Maxwell started rubbing on my chest and on my upper breasts. I was frozen, Farmer said. I wanted badly to get off of the table and have this massage be done. She said the door to the room was open and she sensed Epstein could see her. Farmer also described how Epstein entered her room the next morning and got into bed with her, saying he wanted to cuddle. He pressed his body against hers. She said she got up and hid in the bathroom to get away from him. Before Farmer's testimony, Judge Nathan instructed the jury that the physical contact in New Mexico was not a legal sexual activity under New Mexico state law, since 16 is the age of consent there. However, she told jurors they could consider Farmer's testimony if it was relevant to other issues in the trial. Farmer testified that she told her mother, Janice Swain, in the summer of 1996 that something had happened at the ranch, but she didn't go into detail. I told my mom I was not raped and I didn't want to talk about it, she said. On cross-examination, Maxwell's attorney Laura Mininger questioned whether Farmer's memories had been reconstructed over time. Mininger noted that Maxwell did not touch Farmer's nipples. Farmer agreed that Epstein did not touch her private body parts, nor did she touch his. But Farmer rejected the suggestion that the conduct was not sexualized. I think this was all a pattern of them working on confusing my boundaries, making me question myself about what was right and what was not right, and with the ultimate goal of sexually abusing me, she testified. The prosecution also called Juan Alessi, Epstein's former house manager in Palm Beach, who testified about his responsibilities. He said he cleaned Epstein's massage rooms, rinsed off sex toys, and restocked them in Maxwell's bathroom closet, which also held pornographic tapes and what he described as a black vinyl or leather costume. Alessi testified that he saw many females visit Epstein's home and often saw topless young women lounging by the pool. After the government rested its case on December 10, 2021, Maxwell's defense team moved for acquittal on all counts, which is standard practice at this stage. Judge Nathan denied the motion. The defense called only 9 witnesses over 2 days. They included 2 former Epstein employees, Kimberly Espinoza and Michelle Healy, who shared positive memories of Maxwell. Both testified that they had met the victim known as Jane in the 1990s, but believed she was an adult at the time. The defense also called Elizabeth Loftus, a psychology professor and expert witness, who provided testimony on false memory syndrome, the theory that memories can be influenced or distorted over time. Maxwell chose not to testify. On the final day before the case went to the jury, she addressed the court directly, telling Judge Nathan, "Your Honor, the government has not proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt, so there is no need for me to testify." A spokesperson for Maxwell's family had previously said she was too fragile to testify. The jury began deliberations on December 20th, 2021. They deliberated for approximately 40 hours over 6 days. During deliberations, as COVID-19 infections rose in New York City, Judge Nathan extended the jury's sitting times because she was concerned that juror infections would raise the possibility of a mistrial. On December 29, 2021, the jury returned its verdict. Maxwell was found guilty on 5 of 6 counts: sex trafficking of a minor, transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 3 conspiracy charges. She was acquitted on the single count of enticing a minor to travel to engage in illegal sex acts. Maxwell showed no reaction when the verdicts were read. The convictions carried a potential sentence of up to 65 years in prison. Judge Nathan did not set a sentencing date at that time. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said in a statement, "The road to justice has been far too long. But today, justice has been done. I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom." Annie Farmer released a statement saying, "I am so relieved and grateful that the jury recognized the pattern of predatory behavior that Maxwell engaged in for years and found her guilty of these crimes. She has caused hurt to many more women than the few of us who had the chance to testify in the courtroom." Shortly after the verdict, Maxwell's legal team filed a motion for a new trial. They alleged that a juror, identified by his first and middle names as Scotty David, had failed to disclose during jury selection that he was a victim of sexual abuse. The pretrial questionnaire had asked whether he or anyone in his family had been a victim of sexual abuse. David later stated in media interviews that he did not remember seeing the question because he flew through the form. Those who answered yes were subject to follow-up questioning from Judge Nathan to assess whether they could be impartial. Since David did not answer yes, he was not questioned on the topic before trial. Maxwell's attorneys argued that David's disclosure would have given them grounds to challenge his inclusion on the jury or to use a peremptory strike to remove him. They claimed his undisclosed personal experience with sexual abuse created bias that denied Maxwell a fair trial. Judge Nathan held a hearing on the matter, but ultimately denied the motion for a new trial, ruling that there was insufficient evidence that David had deliberately lied or that his presence on the jury had resulted in bias that affected the verdict. On June 28, 2022, Judge Nathan sentenced Maxwell to 20 years in federal prison. She also ordered Maxwell to pay a $750,000 fine and to serve 5 years of supervised release after completing her prison term. In her sentencing remarks, Judge Nathan stated that Maxwell directly and repeatedly and over the course of many years participated in a horrific scheme to traffic and abuse young girls. She emphasized that Maxwell was being punished for her own crimes, not as a proxy for Epstein. At the sentencing hearing, several victims submitted impact statements. Annie Farmer wrote, "She has caused hurt to many more women than the few of us who had the chance to testify." Virginia Giuffre's family wrote that Maxwell deserved to spend the rest of her life in prison. Maxwell's projected release date was set for July 17, 2037, when she will be 75 years old. The conviction and sentencing marked the end of the trial phase, but Maxwell's legal battles were far from over. Maxwell initially served time at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn while awaiting trial. Her lawyers described the conditions as harsh, including extended periods in solitary confinement. They made repeated requests for bail, offering $5 million bond with monitored home confinement. But the court denied each request, ruling that she posed a flight risk. In July 2022, she was transferred to FCI Tallahassee, a low-security federal prison in Florida, housing approximately 755 female inmates. The facility allowed her to be held in general population rather than isolation. Then, in August 2025, Maxwell was transferred to federal prison camp Bryan in Bryan, Texas, a minimum security facility. This move occurred roughly 1 week after she met twice with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about Epstein's activities and connections. The meetings lasted 9 hours over 2 days at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Tallahassee. Her attorney, David Oscar Markus, told CNN that Maxwell honestly answered every question that Mr. Blanche asked. The meetings were unusual. Such interviews would typically be conducted by an FBI agent or a member of the local U.S. Attorney's Office, not the Deputy Attorney General. The transfer drew immediate criticism. According to Bureau of Prisons policy, sex offenders must be held in at least a low-level security prison like FCI Tallahassee, unless they receive a waiver. Only the administrator of BOP's Designation and Sentence Computation Center can make that decision. Federal prison camp Bryan houses approximately 635 female inmates, mostly white-collar criminals. Notable prisoners at the facility include Elizabeth Holmes, founder of Theranos, and Jen Shaw from Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. The facility has been described by prison consultants and former Bureau of Prisons officials as one of the more comfortable federal facilities, with dormitory-style accommodations and relatively open settings. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a Democrat from Rhode Island, sent a letter to Federal Bureau of Prisons Director William Marshall demanding information about the transfer. He questioned whether Maxwell received preferential treatment and whether the transfer was connected to her meetings with Deputy Attorney General Blanche. The family of Virginia Giuffre, an Epstein accuser who died by suicide earlier in 2025, along with accusers Annie and Maria Farmer, released a joint statement calling the transfer preferential treatment. They wrote, "It is with horror and outrage that we object to the preferential treatment convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell has received. Ghislaine Maxwell is a sexual predator who physically assaulted minor children on multiple occasions, and she should never be shown any leniency." A senior administration official told Fox News that any false assertion this individual was given preferential treatment is absurd. Prisoners are routinely moved in some instances due to significant safety and danger concerns. Josh Leopard, regional vice president for the Federal Prison Officers Union, told NBC News, "You ever hear of the old Club Fed they used to talk about? This is one of those places. It's really a great place to do your time if you're an inmate." Maxwell's projected release date remains July 17, 2037, when she will be 75 years old. Throughout her incarceration, Maxwell has continued to fight her conviction through appeals. She filed multiple challenges on various legal grounds, including claims that Epstein's 2007 non-prosecution agreement with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida should bar her prosecution, that the statute of limitations had expired on some charges, and that improper jury selection denied her a fair trial. In September 2024, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld her conviction and sentence. The court rejected her arguments that Epstein's non-prosecution agreement bound the Southern District of New York, finding that a plea agreement binds only the Office of the United States Attorney for the district in which the plea is entered. The court also found that the indictment was timely filed, that the district court did not abuse its discretion in denying her motion for a new trial based on juror misconduct, and that her sentence was procedurally reasonable. On November 25, 2024, the Second Circuit denied Maxwell's petition for rehearing. Maxwell then petitioned the Supreme Court to review her case. Her petition focused on a single issue: whether Epstein's non-prosecution agreement with federal prosecutors in Florida barred her prosecution in New York. On October 6, 2025, the Supreme Court declined to take up her appeal. Maxwell's siblings released a statement indicating she intends to continue fighting to overturn her conviction. They said she plans to file a habeas petition in the Southern District of New York, where she was convicted in 2021. In December 2025, Maxwell filed a new petition asking a federal court to vacate her conviction based on what her attorneys describe as substantial new evidence. The details of this evidence have not been made public. On February 9, 2026, Maxwell appeared virtually before the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. The committee had subpoenaed her in July 2025 as part of its investigation into Epstein's activities and connections. Dressed in a brown, prison-issued shirt and sitting at a conference table with a bottle of water, Maxwell repeatedly invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination on every question asked. Committee Chairman James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, told reporters after the deposition, "As expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the Fifth and refused to answer any questions. This obviously is very disappointing. We had many questions to ask about the crimes she and Epstein committed, as well as questions about potential co-conspirators." During the closed-door deposition, Maxwell's attorney, David Oscar Markus, delivered a statement to the committee. He said, "Maxwell is prepared to speak fully and honestly if granted clemency by President Trump." He added, "Only she can provide the complete account of Epstein's actions. Some may not like what they hear, but the truth matters. For example, both President Trump and President Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing. Ms. Maxwell alone can explain why, and the public is entitled to that explanation." Democratic lawmakers described the statement as a brazen attempt to secure clemency. Representative Melanie Stansberry, a Democrat from New Mexico, said, "It's very clear she's campaigning for clemency. She is telling Donald Trump through her deposition that she is trying to buy her clemency." Representative Suhas Subramaniam, a Democrat from Virginia, described Maxwell's demeanor during the brief video call as robotic and unrepentant. He told reporters, "This is all strategy for her to try to get a pardon from President Trump, and she's never shown any remorse for the victims in this entire case." Representative Ro Khanna, a Democrat, noted that Maxwell's position appeared inconsistent with her prior conduct, pointing out that she did not invoke the Fifth Amendment when she previously met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Some Republican lawmakers also pushed back against the idea of clemency. Representative Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican from Florida, wrote on social media, "No clemency. You comply or face punishment. You deserve justice for what you did, you monster." Chairman Comer stated, "I personally, for the reasons you just stated, don't think she should be granted any type of immunity or clemency." House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican from Louisiana, added, "It's unconscionable that she's pleading the Fifth or trying to make deals." When asked in the Oval Office on Monday whether he would consider clemency for Maxwell, President Trump said he was unfamiliar with the court's ruling and was unaware that she had appealed her conviction. "I'm going to have to take a look at it. I have to ask DOJ." Trump responded, "I didn't know they rejected it. I didn't know she was even asking for it, frankly." The White House later pointed to previous remarks from the president that indicated the prospect of a pardon was not on his radar. In November 2025, Trump had told reporters on Air Force One, "I haven't thought about it for months. Maybe I haven't thought about it at all. I don't talk about that. I don't rule it in or out." The brother and sister-in-law of the late Virginia Roberts Giuffre sent a letter to the committee, obtained by NBC News, that stated, "Ghislaine Maxwell, you were not a bystander. You were not misled. You were a central, deliberate actor in a system built to find children, isolate them, groom them, and deliver them to abuse. You used trust as a weapon. You targeted vulnerability and turned it into access. That is not a mistake. That is not poor judgment. That is predation." Maxwell's congressional appearance coincided with the Department of Justice allowing members of Congress to review unredacted files related to Jeffrey Epstein. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, passed by Congress and signed by President Trump in November 2025, required the Justice Department to make public all of its material related to its investigations into Epstein and Maxwell. Starting February 9, 2026, lawmakers were permitted to view more than 3 million files without redactions, provided they give 24 hours notice. They are allowed to take notes, but cannot make electronic copies. The release of these documents has already sparked multiple political controversies around the world. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer faced pressure after it was revealed that his former ambassador to the United States had maintained close ties to Epstein. The files show that both Trump and former President Bill Clinton spent time with Epstein in the 1990s and early 2000s, but neither has been credibly accused of wrongdoing related to Epstein's crimes. Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are both scheduled to sit for closed-door depositions before the House Oversight Committee on February 26 and 27, 2026. After Chairman Comer threatened them with contempt of Congress charges, they agreed to testify. The Clintons have been calling for a public hearing rather than a closed-door deposition, but Comer has insisted the testimony will be conducted behind closed doors, with transcripts and video released afterward. As of February 2026, Maxwell remains at federal prison camp Bryan, continuing to pursue legal avenues to overturn her conviction while facing pressure from lawmakers seeking answers about Epstein's network of associates and enablers. The question of whether she will testify fully about Epstein's activities and whether she will receive clemency in exchange remains unanswered. The Ghislaine Maxwell case continues to raise questions that extend far beyond her conviction and imprisonment. What happened during the years she spent as Epstein's closest associate? Who else in their circle had knowledge of the abuse? And has the full story been told? Her conviction brought accountability for crimes a jury determined she committed, crimes that affected the lives of young women who trusted her. The testimony of Annie Farmer, Carolyn, Jane, and Kate gave voices to experiences that had remained hidden for decades. Yet Maxwell's recent congressional appearance and her attorney's suggestion of clemency in exchange for testimony have thrust the case back into the spotlight. The possibility that she possesses information about others in Epstein's network, information she has so far chosen not to share, continues to fuel public and congressional scrutiny. The survivors and their families have been clear in their opposition to any leniency. They argue that Maxwell was not a bystander, but a central figure in a system designed to exploit vulnerable young people. As of now, Maxwell remains at federal prison camp Bryan, pursuing legal challenges while the controversy around her transfer and potential clemency continues to unfold. Her projected release date, July 17, 2037, is more than a decade away. Whether she will serve that full sentence or whether political pressure and promised testimony will alter her fate remains to be seen. The Ghislaine Maxwell story is not just about one woman's fall from privilege to prison. It's about power, manipulation, accountability, and the question of whether justice delayed can ever truly be justice delivered. For now, the case remains unresolved in the court of public opinion, even as the legal system has reached its verdict. This has been the story of Ghislaine Maxwell. Thanks for watching.